Kuutiga. Kiffatitatigisatik sallaattumik asannittumillu ummatiqaqqullugi ikiukki. Tapersikkit nunarsuup nunaani tamani siunnersorneqarneruq qaamanerani katersaarsuarniit ааllaavaqartumik siammarteqaqqullugi. Ilumutissaavatit nakuusoq. Issaanili angingaartoq. Tamanut naalagaasoq. Ilumuttassaavutit tukkortoq. Sallaatsoq. Saamasoq. Tamanit saamaannerpa.
O thou forgiving Lord, thou art the shelter for all these thy servants. Thou knowest the secrets and art aware of all things. We are all helpless, and thou art the mighty, the omnipotent. We are all sinners, and thou art the forgiver of sins, the merciful, the compassionate. O Lord, look not at our shortcomings. Deal with us according to thy grace and bounty. Our shortcomings are many, but the ocean of thy forgiveness is boundless. Our weakness is grievous, but the evidences of thy need and assistance are clear. Therefore, confirm and strengthen us. Enable us to do that which is worthy of thy threshold. Illumine our hearts. Grant us discerning eyes and attentive ears. Resuscitate the dead and heal the sick. Bestow wealth upon the poor and give peace and security to the fearful. Accept us in thy kingdom and illumine us with the light of guidance. Thou art the generous, thou art the clement, thou art the kind.
Okay, while Louis is trying to get the Íqán on the screen, could somebody please tell us the summary of the last two paragraphs we did in the last session, please? Just remind us of the main points. Anybody or anyone with 1 point or whatever? No? Louis, what about yourself?
Maybe someone else could unmute themselves and take the chance.
I think Barry was trying to say.
Who is that?
Oh,
Just agree, but Barry's there.
Mehdi?
Huh? Go on then. Hello, anybody? How many do we have online now, Louis?
We have 26. AJ also raised his hand. Ravi, were you trying to say something? Ravi, you are muted, so you need to unmute yourself. I think also Mehdi was trying to say something.
Mehdi.
We are not able to hear you, unfortunately.
Oh dear.
Okay, so AJ, if you have something to share, please go ahead.
Thanks. It was some time ago. I can't exactly remember what we did in the last session, but
yes.
I seem to remember that we were discussing the unique station of the prophets and manifestations, and we were discussing the how that can sometimes the way that the manifestations and prophets and apostles are received by the mass of people in their time, and very often I remember we were saying a prophet is recognized and celebrated everywhere except in his own country, except by his own people. And that's a repeated pattern throughout history, and something that humankind unfortunately never seems to learn from. That was one point that I recall.
Yes, yes, yes. Anyone else with any ideas?
I think also, based on what AJ was saying, we were also discussing how that the manifestations of God have always been promised, and then when he did come, people turned away from him. And that is recorded in all the sacred books. It's not just one-time case, but it happens every time a manifestation of a prophet is revealing himself and declaring his mission. And we talked about that it's the case for anyone, both high and low. So it's not only those that it's everyone, I guess.
Yes. And then Baha'u'llah mentions about that those people high and low, everyone were actually expecting the coming of the promised one from their books. But when he arrived, when he came and appeared, they all denied him. Each and every one of them, through the history, shows that each and every one of them have been denied. And the other point that we discussed was when Baha'u'llah keeps asking the uncle, and that applies to us as well, that we should think and ponder about the cruelties that was inflicted on these manifestations of God. And of course, then we had the two quotations from Quran, because this is relevant to the next paragraph that we are going to study tonight. The two verses from Quran says the same thing, that they were all tortured and made to suffer, except for their own homes, something like that. And these two are the verses of Quran that Baha'u'llah quotes over here. Okay, if there is nothing else, then we move on to paragraph 5. If somebody reads it for us, please.
Is everyone able to see the screen?
Yes.
I can see it. Is everybody?
I'll read it if you like, Rostam.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, sure. How wonderful to see you. Hello, Nazi. Hi.
Hi, Rustam. Hi.
Okay.
روح مامان شاد باشه.
خیلی ممنون، مرسی.
Okay, we'd like
Go
me to
on
read.
then.
Okay.
Yes, please. Yes.
Paragraph 5.
Yes.
In like manner, those words that have streamed forth from the source of power and descended from the heaven of glory are innumerable and beyond the ordinary comprehension of man. To them that are possessed of true understanding and insight, the Surah of Hud surely sufficeth. Ponder a while those holy words in your heart, and with utter detachment, strive to grasp their meaning. Examine the wondrous behavior of the prophets, and recall the defamations and denials uttered by the children of negation and falsehood. Perchance, you may cause the bird of the human heart to wing its flight away from the abodes of heedlessness and doubt unto the nest of faith and certainty. and drink deep from the pure waters of ancient wisdom, and partake of the fruit of the tree of divine knowledge. Such is the share of the pure in heart of the bread that hath descended from the realms of eternity and holiness. Rostam, you're muted, Rostam. We can't hear you. Now we can hear you.
Now we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Now we
Okay.
can. We couldn't before.
Okay, thank you. In the first sentence, Baha'u'llah says, those words that have streamed forth from the source of power. Which words is he referring to? It's the words of Quran in the last paragraph. Those two are, O misery of man, no messenger cometh unto them, but they laugh him to scorn. And the other is, each nation had plotted darkly against their messenger to lay violent hold on him, and disputed with vain words to invalidate the truth. So he's referring to these two verses, right? He says, in like manner, those words that have streamed forth from the source of power and descended from the heaven of glory are innumerable. He says there are many, many verses that refers to the cruelties that was inflicted or upon the messengers of God. And then he says, it is beyond the ordinary comprehension of man. What is meant by this? He says it's beyond the ordinary comprehension of man. Can anyone explain that? What you understand by this?
Would that be understanding without the influence of the manifestation of God?
Yes, that's a point. That's a point. But I think he's referring to people who have no true understanding, which we had read and discussed before. True understanding and certainty that Baha'u'llah refers to all along this book is what we need. And the true understanding, in summary, means that it's knowing and recognizing with certainty the messenger of God for the day. And this true understanding only comes to our hearts from God, as you said, Chris, via his messengers. It is never dependent upon the acquired learning. And then he says people who want to have true understanding, they should detach themselves from all the worldly, the earthly things. Remember in the paragraph, first paragraph we read before, he says that we should cleanse our ears from idle talks, minds from vain imagination, hearts from worldly affections, and so on, is training ourselves to be detached. And then he says you need another thing, and that is to sanctify your soul. By detachment and sanctifying your souls, you will get to the point or to the stage of true understanding. Now he says that there are some people who do not have that. And those people are the ones that he calls them here ordinary comprehension. Their comprehension is not true comprehension or true understanding. Do you agree? Does anyone have anything else to say about that? Okay, so it looks like I am talking the most.
Okay.
Go on then.
Okay, I'm sorry. If I may add, please, because
yes, sure, please.
So it happens that usually there is a literary reading of something, a normal reading of it, of anything, literary, a layman's reading, in a term we will say it, and then there is the other aspect of reading it with a profound feeling of it, and just to read it and to digest it, understand it with, as you have just said, with a sanctified heart. There is a difference between the people reading something literally and someone reading it with a sanctified heart. So their understanding will differ, definitely. There will be a different understanding between a layman's reading, I may say so, or an ordinary reading or literary reading, and someone with a sanctified heart. That's a distinction being made. Then the comprehension will differ from each understanding of a normal people reading it, and that from a sanctified heart. Just to add on what you have said, please.
You need to unmute yourself again.
Yes.
That's it.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, so you may not see my picture. Is that okay? Hello?
We can see you, we can hear you now.
Okay. So Abul Fazl Golpayegani said that he had read this book of Iran 17 times with the eye of intelligence. And he didn't find anything interesting in it. But then he said when he read it with the eye of faith,
that's it.
You see, that's the difference. Then he could detect from it gems, invaluable gems, very deep in the book. And so that 17 times that he read, it was before he had become a Baha'i, before his faith. So yes, it makes a difference, of course. Reading is one thing and concentrating is the other. But having, you see in the next sentence, he says, to them that are possessed of true understanding. The sentence before he says, ordinary understanding, ordinary comprehension. And then he says, true understanding. This true understanding is what we see in the very first sentence of the first paragraph of Íqán. And he says, no man shall attain the shores of the ocean of true understanding, except he be detached from all that is in heaven and on earth. Okay? And then in the next sentence, he says, but those people who possess the true understanding, the surah of Hud is enough for them. Okay? You all agree, or is there any other point anybody wants to add or subtract? Yes, please.
Dr. Mehdi,
Yes.
when Baha'u'llah is writing that the Surah of Hud will suffice,
Yes.
just referring to this specific concept of the persecution of messengers of God, or is he saying
Yes.
that if you really have such true understanding and insight, you don't even need the Íqán, because you will see very clearly then you don't need anything else? Does that make sense?
You don't need Íqán, means certitude.
Sorry, the Kitáb-i-Íqán. Sorry, you wouldn't need
Yeah,
to
right.
read even Kitáb-i-Íqán to see that the Bab's life is a reflection of the Surah of Hud, for example. That makes sense? Is that what he's referring to? As in, the Surah of Hud is enough to supersede the proofs in the Íqán for a person with true understanding and insight.
One could say, in my opinion, I don't know, one could say that from only that point of view, yes, only that point of view about persecution of the messengers of God, then he's saying that Surah of Hud is enough, although there are many, many other verses referring to it. Is that something that makes sense? Because otherwise, the Kitáb-i-Íqán is also, there are other things that one can get out of it. It's not just the persecution that the prophets went through. That's my understanding. I don't know if you're thinking anything more than that. Yes, that's a good point, because he says this is enough. Just Surah Hud is enough to understand. And then after that, he says, ponder a while those holy words in your heart. He says that he puts condition that you must think deeply into them, study them with utter detachment. You see? And then you will grasp the inner meaning of it if you do that. So yes, so I think this is probably true, that Surah of Hud is enough for us if we study all those. Now, Surah of Hud is a surah in the Kitab in Quran, and it has 123 verses, or ayah in Arabic, which recounts the dire consequences of the nations in the past who rejected every one of the prophets who appeared for their guidance. This chapter tells the stories of Prophet Noah, Hud, Saleh, Lot, Shoaib, and Moses, and urges the people to accept Muhammad as the prophet of God. Now, it's interesting that the holy books of the Old and the New Testaments do not mention either Hud, Saleh, or the people of Ad, or Thamud, people of Samud. They are only described in Quran, these four topics. But others like Noah, Salah or Saleh, Abraham, Moses are mentioned in the Bible. About Surah of Hud, do you want to know a little bit more about it? Is anyone, or does everyone know about this surah?
It would be nice.
Chapter.
It would be nice. I know Sally also raised her hand. I don't know if she wants to speak now or after the history has explained. Sally?
Well, my question is about the servanthood, because I understand that it would be to recognize Muhammad, but how would it be applicable to recognizing the revelation of Baha'u'llah, since it's in the Quran? I don't understand that part.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Say it again.
Oh, probably you're going to answer
Sorry.
this. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So you said the Surah of Hud, it's located in the Quran, and it's asking the people to recognize Muhammad, but how is it applicable in the recognition of the revelation of Baha'u'llah?
Yes. Anyone wants to answer that?
I think,
Anything that comes?
yeah, if I may. I think, Sally, what it's doing, it's showing what's been happening over the millennia to the messengers of God, and that's why in the Surah of Hud, you know, you need to recognize Muhammad is the prophet for that time. But it's a comparison connected then, of course, to the time of the Bab, and you have to recognize him. So I think what he's doing, he's building up the, if you like, the historical background to what's happened over millennia, and this is still happening with the Bab. It's going to happen to him as well. I think that's where the direction is going of the Iqán.
Also,
Good point. Anyone? Yeah.
there's a story in the Revelation of Baha'u'llah by Adib Terazadeh, Volume 3, where Adib Terazadeh describes a conversation his father had with a Christian missionary in Iran, in Persia. And in that, he says that he visited this missionary to ask him to tell about the faith, the Christian faith. Sorry, I'm looking for my charger. I'll get back. I just need to find my charger.
Okay. Okay, in the meantime, is there any other opinion, please? Right. Now, my understanding of this is that, you know, mind you, this is the book that was revealed in the questions that the uncle of the Bab, who was not a believer at that time, put to Baha'u'llah. And this is answer to him. Therefore, he is trying to prove one point, and that is that every time a messenger appeared, every single time, in spite of people expecting him, they denied him. And so he's telling the uncle of the Bab that you are also possibly doing the same as those people who actually persecuted these messengers of God. He's telling him not to get to this point, but start thinking about the opposition that people did not accept the messengers of that time. You see, so he's just making this point to him that think properly, think deeply. He keeps repeating, ponder, reflect upon it. Think about this surah. Why were these messengers of God denied? And then he says that you might understand. And this if he understood that, then for him to understand that the Bab was also like one of those messengers that has now appeared, and people are opposing him. But if they think properly, they will find that he is from God. Does that make any sense? I don't know the name of the lady who asked the question.
It was Sally. You know her, Beheshti, from the Holy Land.
No, yes,
Oh,
that
yes.
that makes sense. Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm glad I was able to do 1 point. Okay, Sally, thank you for that good question. Next, please. Anybody else?
Could I continue on the story?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry, we forgot you, Louis.
Don't worry, that's good. So in this conversation, the father of Adib Terazadeh has with the Christian missionary,
Yes.
he asked this clergyman to convince him of the truth of the mission of Jesus Christ. And in that, the missionary pulls the Bible. Like he brings the Bible to the table, and then he starts reading the miracles of Jesus Christ.
Yes. Yes.
And then the Baha'i ask, how can we be certain that these miracles happened? And the Christian says, well, they happened. It's written here. And then he asks, well, how can it then be that you don't believe in the other miracles that Muhammad did, or Moses, or Buddha, or whoever he don't believe carried out these miracles? Later in the conversation, he says that I need a real proof, a proof that is so convincing that nobody could argue with it. Everyone can argue with whether or not the miracle happened, he said. So the Christian asked him to tell him about the Baha'i faith.
Yes.
Then the Baha'i said, so long as you fail to appreciate the reality of Christ in its true perspective and persist in regarding miracles as the decisive test for a prophet, miracles which you have never seen nor could prove to have occurred in their outward sense, I am sorry to say that you won't be able to know Baha'u'llah. So I think this story is teaching us to understand the prophet of the one that we believe in. And once we have attained that true level of certainty and understands the reality of that messenger, we will also be able to understand the next one. Because it's interesting, the Christian the Baha'i describes that Jesus arose with no army, with no power, but now he has conquered the world. And then he asked, could you or I do that? To which they both agree they cannot do. And then at the end of that conversation, the Christian asked, but what about Muhammad? You know, because he's able to see that Muhammad was actually able to do the exact same as Jesus. He had no power, but now he has spread his teachings all across the world. And then, of course, if he still has that pure heart and understand the manifestation, he would then be able to understand the greatness of the holiness of Bab and Baha'u'llah.
Yes. Yes, thank you for reminding us of that story in that revelation of Baha'u'llah. Great. Any other points anyone wants to bring up? Or okay, now prophethood. He was one of the 5 prophets of God who appeared in Arabia for the people of Arabia. And this Arabia actually extends across the whole of Arabian Peninsula up to the north to the Sinai Peninsula. And so there were 5 prophets who appeared in that region for the Arabs. And they are Hud, Saleh, Abraham, Shoaib, and Muhammad. But Quran also mentions 25 prophets. and like it begins with Adam, Idris, or Enoch, Nuh or Noah, Hud, Saleh, Ibrahim or Abraham, Lut, Ismail, Ishaq, and so on, until Muhammad himself. Now, prophethood appeared amongst the people of Ad. Ad, spelled A-D, was the nation amongst whom prophethood appeared. They were called Ad because of the name of their ancestor, Ad, who was the grandson of Aram. Aram was the grandson of Noah, and Noah himself was 10th generation from Adam. The people of Ad were extremely powerful and wealthy, and they built countless buildings and monuments to show their power. However, the Ad's people wealth ultimately proved to be their failure as they became arrogant and forsook God and began to adopt idols for worship. Okay, now prophethood, right from his childhood, he remained constantly in prayers with God. It is related that Hud's mother, a pious woman who had seen great visions at her son's birth, was the only person who encouraged Hud in his worship. Thus, at the age of 40, by the will of God, he was manifested as a prophet for the people of Ad. Hud is possibly Eber in the Bible, E-B-E-R. When Hud started preaching and inviting them to the worship of only the true God, and when he told them to repent for their past sins and ask for mercy and forgiveness, the Ad people began to revile him and wickedly began to mock God's message.
Friends?
Yeah.
Is it just me, or is it everyone?
Sorry? Sorry, say it again. Hello? Hello?
What was the question?
We can hear you, Dr. Beheshti, but I think Lewis is having some trouble hearing you.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Is that okay? I'm just just telling you a little bit about prophethood. Much like many people today, they believe that the purpose of life was to accumulate wealth, prestige, and possessions. The majority of the people refused to follow him and kept ignoring and mocking all he said. As their aggression, arrogance, and idolatry deepened, God, after plenty of warning, sent a thunderous storm to finish the wicked people of Ad once and for all. The destruction of Ad is described in Quran. Only Hud, Prophet Hud, and his small band of followers was saved and are believed to have migrated to the Handramut area of what is today known as Yemen. So that was a little bit about prophethood. Okay. Please don't allow me to talk too much. Please, I I think everyone would like that all of the others kind of contribute your opinions, your ideas, whatever you understand by it. Or if you're going, or you might suggest that we do it in a different way or whatever, is what do you think? Okay.
Mehri's hand was up.
Yeah. Then in that paragraph, Baha'u'llah asked the uncle, or actually he's asking the people of the world to look or examine the wondrous behavior of the prophets on one hand, and also look into the defamations and denial uttered by the children of negation and falsehood. Perchance you may cause the birth of human beings. So he's saying that study both sides. Deepen yourself into why these messengers of God were treated by these people and how they did it. At the same time, look at the behavior of the prophets, the wonderful behavior of the prophets themselves. So on both sides, he's asking people to study, and he says that maybe, perchance, if people do that, they might be able to guide some who are heedless towards faith and certainty. So this is something that we need to do, to read and study the history of the prophets of the past, how they went through these troubles, and how these people of children of negation. Now, what is children of negation? Baha'u'llah uses the word children of negation. Sometimes in Persian, he uses kalame. Kalame means word. And guardian, the beloved guardian, in some places, he has translated that into letters of negation. In fact, it means people who were negative in response to the messengers of God. I'll read one or two paragraphs from Baha'u'llah again about these people of negation and the Bab. He says, for the letters of negation, no matter how far they be removed, this is in one of the prayers. For the letters of negation, no matter how far they may be removed from the holy fragrances of thy knowledge, and however forgetful they may become of the wondrous splendors of the dawning light of thy beauty. He's addressing God because it's a prayer, which are shed from the heaven of thy majesty, must needs exist in thy realm, so that the words which affirm thee may thereby be exalted. Can somebody explain what is meant by that these letters of negation, Baha'u'llah is asking God for them to exist, and so that the words, his words, which affirm thee may thereby be exalted. Would someone want to explain that? Or your understanding?
We have 2 participants raising their hands, so just
Good.
unmute yourself.
Okay. Go on then. Whoever.
I've noticed that the connection or the allusion and the metaphor of letters and people, this is quite a common one. For example, letters
Yes.
of the living, and also in another group, we're studying the tablets of the light verse and the commentary on the disconnected letters that Baha'u'llah also wrote, and the connection there of pens and ink and letters to people that was also there. So it's a recurring theme, like you say. I think it's quite powerful to say for Baha'u'llah to remind us here that the defamations and the negations of people who are following a different path, maybe ignorant path, are quite useful for us, because, and we should meditate on those. We shouldn't ignore them. We should use them as a corrective force to learn from their mistakes, as a reminder for us. Because if you're surrounded by, well, you can't be surrounded by everyone who is perfect. That's impossible, just given the way the world is. So since we are surrounded by falsehood and negation and attachments, we can use them to our advantage. That's how I perceive this.
Beautiful. Yes. Wonderful. Anybody else?
Sally, you raised your hand. Or was that from before? Okay. It reminds me also of the fire tablet. We're not for the cold, how will the heat of thy words prevail?
Exactly. Yep.
Simon, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, although I was listening to your point there, but do you want to finish your point? I didn't quite catch the end of your point, Louis.
Yeah, it's just
say it again?
in the fire tablet, the prayer, where Baha'u'llah is conversing with God. God says that were it not for the cold, how would the heat of thy words prevail? And he uses other analogies also that I don't remember by heart. Were it not for darkness, how could we see light? He uses other analogies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you have something very, very strongly negative, then that's when you actually see, oh, look how positive and wonderful what Baha'u'llah is saying is, when you get all these people, for example, trying to defend what he's saying. So, and if not for the sunlight, you wouldn't notice darkness and shadow.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
It's also interesting how Baha'u'llah rose in Persia, which was the most corrupt country at that time, and he had his revelation in the Shia Chal, the most disgusting place. And you really see that these contrasts are just so great.
Yes. Yes, I think that fire tablet is a very good example, because God addressing Baha'u'llah gives few of these examples that it wasn't because of the calamity, because of all the negative things, that how people would see the positive part which Baha'u'llah was playing. So yes, it is necessary for that to be, and he says they must needs exist. Now the Bab about these people, he says, whoso acted in conformity with that which is revealed therein will abide in paradise under the shadow of his affirmation, and reckoned among the most sublime letters in the presence of God, while whoso deviated, were it even so much as the tip of a grain of barley, will be consigned to the fire and will be assembled neath the shadow of negation. This truth had likewise been laid bare in the Quran, where in numerous instances God had set down that whoever should pass judgment contrary to the bounds fixed by him would be deemed an infidel. So it's a very strong quotation that were it even so much as the tip of a grain of barley. So we have actually this certitude, this book of certitude and certainty and knowledge and understanding is for us to be 100% committed. You see? But as Simon said, and he gave very nice examples, Baha'u'llah says that they need to exist, although they have a different place in the kingdom above. Some call it hell, others call it whatever. And the Bab here refers to the fire. They are consigned to the fire, but still, whatever that means, it means that they need to exist, so that one knows the opposite. Again, Baha'u'llah on this subject, I read another little paragraph. If all who are in heaven and on earth be invested in this day with the powers and attributes destined for the letters of the Bayan, whose station is 10,000 times more glorious than that of the letters of the Quranic dispensation, and if they one and all should swift as the twinkle of an eye hesitate to recognize my revelation, they shall be accounted in the sight of God of those that have gone astray and regarded as letters of negation. How about that? A twinkle of an eye. Yeah, so we need to be really very careful and pray for our end, as it's said in the Íqán later on, so that our end is positive on this earth. Okay. Baha'u'llah in this paragraph mentions that perchance you may cause the bird of the human heart to wing its flight away from the abodes of heedlessness and doubt. Why bird? Why is this used as an analogy? Bird of human heart. In the Persian hidden word, Baha'u'llah says, wings have I bestowed upon thee, that thou mayest fly to the realms of mystic holiness, and not the regions of satanic fancy. So really in the Baha'i writings are full of these examples likening the souls of men to a bird. This is also quite repeated in the Kitáb-i-Íqán, like in paragraph 156 and 178, in which phrases like bird of thy mind and the bird of thy heaven are used. And Mr. Dunbar, in his book, A Companion to the Study of Kitáb-i-Íqán, he says, we are told that if a bird is always soaring higher, its progress will be continual. But if it relaxes, it will necessarily descend to the earth. Yeah? Okay, then later on, or at the end of this, the last sentence says, such is the share of the pure in heart, of the bread that had descended from the realms of eternity and holiness. Again, something's been referred to the bread. What is the bread? I think people from Christian background should be able to explain this to us. The bread or manna, M-A-N-N-A, manna.
In the Old Testament, manna from heaven was
Yes.
mentioned in the time of Moses. It always sounded to me when I read that it was talking about a physical thing like food, but it's not really a physical food, is it? It's a food of the spirit. It's from the Word of God. It's to feed us with that spiritual knowledge.
Yes. Yes. Exactly, yes. That is the true meaning of it. Anyone else would want to have any opinion on bread and manna?
No.
Just,
May I ask one question?
yes, please go ahead, Savi.
Just now mentioned that the soul, which is not flight higher, it returns to earth. Means is it incarnation? Because I'm grew up with the Buddhist background, we believed incarnation. What about? I want to know: is it intent to incarnation? Nobody understands.
You mean the
Sorry.
bread?
No.
You mean the bread is related to reincarnation?
No, soul which is not flew higher, they will return to the earth. You told us. So, which is mean? Is it returning? Is incarnating?
Sorry, your voice
Because
has been cut off.
Maybe I can try, Savi. So, Ariane, will you try?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Sabi. It was very clear from my own understanding. So I can repeat the question. The question was whether when the soul doesn't progress but goes back to the earth, whether it's reincarnating. From my own understanding, that's not the case, but it just means that your soul isn't progressing, but just going backwards.
Thank you, Arian. You read my soul.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes. Well, of course, the question of reincarnation is something that one can discuss at later on, but as long as the soul is concerned, I think in one of the sessions we went quite into detail of it earlier. And there are numerous writings on that. In some answered question, in gleanings, there are quite clear points about it. The thing that as Baha'is, we do not believe is that the soul never comes back to this. The soul never comes back in somebody else's body to progress in this world and then go back as it is believed in some of the religions like Hinduism or people in that part of the, Buddhist. But the true meaning of reincarnation is, in the Baha'i writing, is that the qualities of the people can recur in another person with obviously a different soul. Like, once Baha'u'llah asked Ruhullah, the 12-year-old, at that time when he was in the presence of Baha'u'llah, he was probably 8 or 9 years old. He asked him, what do you understand by this reincarnation? And he said, for the return of the prophets. When it is said that the Prophet Christ or Muhammad will come back, Baha'u'llah asked this child what he understands. And he gave Baha'u'llah a beautiful example. He said, look at this rose. The rose that we see it now, one can say that it was the rose that appeared last year. If we say that, we are right in saying that, because it's got exactly the same color, the same smell, the same beauty, everything. And these messengers of God are like these roses. It grows in this age, and then it grows again in another age. So, it's a very interesting subject. If one goes into the writings, you will see it very, very interesting to read about it.
Well, thank you.
Not at all. Now, mana literally means, it's taught by a Hebrew man to mean a substance exuded by the tamarisk tree, almost always used to refer to God's nourishment in the Bible. Manna is also known in the Bible as the bread of heaven, corn of heaven, angels' food, and spiritual meat. Sometimes it is spelled as manna, M-A-N-A. According to the Bible, an edible substance which God provided for the Israelites during their travels in the Sinai desert for 40 years following Exodus and prior to the conquest of Canaan, their promised land. This miraculous food substance came with the morning dew and looked like frost on the ground. In the book of Exodus, chapter 16, verse 31, describes it as something like coriander seed, white, and its taste was like wafers and honey. I didn't know in those days they made wafer and honey. More than 1,000 years later, Jesus Christ repeated the miracle of manna in the feeding of the 5,000 crowd, which followed him in the wilderness, and he multiplied a few loaves of bread until everyone had eaten their fill. Jesus' phrase, Jesus Christ, he says, "Give us this day our daily bread," in the Lord's Prayer. This is a reference to manna from heaven, an unexpected benefit or assistance, especially when it comes at the time when it is needed most. So this is what is said in that Lord's Prayer. Therefore, when Christ says, "Man shall not live by bread alone," he meant that God's will, his word, is a heavenly food for the soul that gives and sustains. "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst." John chapter 6, verse 35. But you see, in the prayer, he says, "Man shall not live by bread alone," in that verse that Christ says. Here he means the bread, the earthly bread, the physical bread, I think. And in the second verse, it is said, "I am the bread of life." It means his revelation. Okay? Hello?
We hear you.
Oh, you can. Good.
Yeah.
I thought I was cut off.
No.
So this is quite commonly used in all the books, I think, in Christianity, in the Old Testament. Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha has used it. You see? Abdul Baha says, "Thank God that thou wert fed from the table which had descended from heaven. That food is, I am the bread which descended from heaven, recorded in the gospel. That is faith, certainty, love, and knowledge." This is Abdul Baha's explanation. But there are many other quotations on that. You can refer to it. All right. Anything else anyone wants to add? Or I think we've got enough time perhaps to cover paragraph 6. That's quite straightforward. Shall we?
I would just like to mention, it mentions heart again. So it says, "Such is the share of the pure in heart."
Yes.
And it just, as you mentioned again with the story of Mirza Abul Fazl, how he read it, as I understand it, with his mind, with his intellect. But if you, as we also read from Baha'u'llah earlier, that knowledge is bestowed upon a human heart by God. And then I just looked it up, and it seems the word heart seems to appear 82 times in this book. So it's quite interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to keep that in mind when we're reading these when you're reading this book and any of the books of Baha'u'llah, the prophets.
Sure. So really, could we say that heart is another word for soul? pure soul. Of course, its intentions as well. You see, yes. I think for people with the pure heart are the ones that they are the ones who train their soul to be sanctified. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes. So all those prerequisites for that are mentioned in the very first paragraph of this book, actually. To be detached and to train our souls. And one of the ways in training our souls, apart from having all those qualities of being detached, is to do noble things on this earth. You see, one of the examples that Mr. Thoyerzadeh again gives very beautifully is that I think I mentioned this in one of the sessions before. He says that when a child is in the womb of the mother, it develops all organs, but none of those organs is useful to this child in the womb. But when he comes onto this earth, if he's without one of them, then he suffers. Therefore, we should develop or acquire these attributes on this earth so that when we go to the next world, it comes useful. For example, the crudest example can be if I am good to my neighbor, if I show him love and do some good to my neighbor, whether I do it or I don't do it, it doesn't make any difference on this earth. But it perhaps comes useful when I go to the next world. So all the noble attributes, if we acquire it on this earth, then it helps to develop in the next world. And it's like a child coming from the womb. If it appears in this world and it doesn't carry with it an arm, that arm is not going to progress in this world, is not going to develop. That's why when we pray for the departed, we say that the soul of such a person be elevated in the next world. Now, that person's soul can only elevate by the attributes that that person has taken with him over there. That's what I understand from what Mr. Thoyerzadeh is full of wonderful analogies and examples. You think we should do paragraph 6 or leave it for next time? How do people feel? Are you tired? You must be tired of me talking too much.
Not at all.
To be honest, it would be lovely if we did one more paragraph.
Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. Is it May? Why don't you read it for us then?
Okay, no problem.
Paragraph 6.
Yes. Sorry, it's just loading. Paragraph 6. Okay. Should you acquaint yourself with the dignities heaped upon the prophets of God, and apprehend the true causes of the objections voiced by their oppressors, you will surely appreciate the significance of their position. Moreover, the more closely you observe the denials of those who have opposed the manifestations of the divine attributes, the firmer will be your faith in the cause of God. Accordingly, a brief mention will be made in this tablet of divers accounts relative to the prophets of God, that they may demonstrate the truth that throughout all ages and centuries their manifestations of power and glory have been subjected to such heinous cruelties that no pen dare describe them. Perchance, this may enable a few to cease to be perturbed by the clamour and protestations of the divines and the foolish of this age, and cause them to strengthen their confidence and certainty.
Now this this is quite straightforward, isn't it? Can somebody just summarize it for us, please? Anyone? Or any point that you get from it?
It seems that when it's talking about, so when you acquaint yourself with the indignities heaped upon the prophets of God and apprehend the true causes of the objections voiced by the oppressors and so forth, it sounds like the people who are pushing forward these denials to the prophets are doing it to help themselves. And usually it was the divines of each age who start these denials, because when the new messenger, the new manifestation comes, the divines of that age realize that they don't have an answer to what they've got to say, and their popularity, their power is diminished by the arrival of the manifestation. However, if they were to turn towards him, they would find that their real power, if you like, is actually increased. But it's and if you appreciate that this is the reason why these people are doing this, then it will actually strengthen your belief in God, your belief in what the manifestation says. It says, throughout all ages and centuries, the manifestations of power and glory have been subjected to such heinous cruelties, no pen dare describe them. And so in every age this is happening. In every age you have these divines and the foolish people who follow them doing these things. So it's, if you understand that, you'll become stronger in faith.
That's interesting point, isn't it? Yeah. Anyone else?
Dr. Vashti,
Yes.
I just suggests me, Dr. Vashti, if you move your camera, it would be a wonderful place.
Sorry?
Like the head and the ceiling.
Sorry, you're being cut off, May.
That's perfect. And if you move the camera a little bit back, oh, that's.
I know then you can't hear me because I had it here. How about now? Is it okay?
Oh, yes, that's great.
And you can hear me.
I can hear you and see you.
I see your beautiful face.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I brought it back because earlier it was being cut off. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
I have a note to make, Dr. Beheshti.
Go on then, Asha.
The first one is I was studying this somewhere else, and someone, I loved it when they said, where it says, by the clamor and protestations of the divines and the foolish. And they said, well, you could swap those two words round and it would become the foolish divines.
Right.
Which I thought was quite good.
The foolish divines, yes.
Which
Good
the
point.
ones that don't come round are, I guess, in one way.
No.
That's one thing. The other thing is that we know so many of the first Babis were mullahs and sheikhs and things like this. So although the divines are the ones that you know, it's their duty actually to bring the believers over to this new revelation. Most of them don't. Some of them do, and I think
Yes.
they have a very high place, you know, for doing that. And the other point that I wanted to say was, for me, this is the first sort of sentence there is a proof of a manifestation of God. You know, when they are put through these same trials that the Surah of Hud talks about, yet their message continues, and these sorry, sunset. Let me turn my alarm off. And interestingly, what I thought, there's another friend in here, Adam Powers. We went to talk with Kevin Locke about Native American prophets and things like that. So actually, in the future, or now even, when people want to study potentially other prophets in their traditional cultures, this could be one of the proofs that they could find for prophets in their cultures. I just thought that was an interesting thing that came out to me then.
Of course, anything helps. Yes, very good. Yes. Anything else, boys and girls?
May I please?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Dr. Vihesti. So here it is stated that the more you became acquainted with the indignities that have been heaped upon the manifestation of God, the more firmer you will become in your faith. So you will be able to understand the why of doing it. And then here it is stated that during in this tablet, there will be diverse times where mention will be made of the heinous cruelties heaped upon this. And by this, perhaps a few person will cease to be perturbed by the clamor or protestation of those who are denying the manifestation of God. And this thereby will cause their belief, their confidence to strengthen. So here in a summary, say that the more you understand the why they are doing it, the firmer and the more confident one becomes in their faith.
Yeah.
This is the gist of it.
Yes. Sure. Mind you, Baha'u'llah is addressing the uncle of the Bab to recognize the station of his nephew. Yes, and he's showing him the way. But he's also telling the rest of the world, knowing that this book, which was revealed in something like 48 hours, in that he knew that in future people are going to be studying this. And he's saying that if you do that, not only the uncle himself, his faith and certainty about the messenger of God for the day, which is the Bab himself. And mind you, Baha'u'llah hadn't declared at this time, and the uncle wasn't aware that he was who he was to be, him whom God shall make manifest. So he's telling him to ways of recognizing his nephew's station. That's why he's making a point. And he's saying that in the next paragraphs, Baha'u'llah is going to give a brief summary, account of some of these prophets who appeared in the past and how they were put into trouble, how they were treated. So he's making a point, and I think there are many other places in Iran that Baha'u'llah keeps on repeating this point about us studying these messengers of God. I mean, before, one of the points that is new in the Baha'i faith is that the station of all these prophets of God are the same. The difference is in the intensity of their revelation. But he says, beware not to make any difference to the stations of God. And, you know, before reading this Iran, to be honest, I did not know who Hud was, who Noah was. I hadn't read Quran. I haven't read Quran still now. But this book is a source of us, is a source of guiding us towards studying these and becoming aware of what they went through. Okay, I've got some quotations here by Baha'u'llah in other places that he talks about the indignities that was heaped upon the prophets, as he says in this paragraph. One of them is this. I will send you these notes tomorrow. You can read it if you think it might be useful for you. He says, behold how the people, as a result of the verdict pronounced by the divines of his age. So another point that he keeps bringing it up, he actually blames a lot of this onto the divines of the time. People who were religious leaders before the appearance of that prophet of the age. And he says, the verdict pronounced by the divines of his age have cast Abraham, the friend of God, into fire. How Moses, he who held converse with the Almighty, was denounced as liar and slanderer. Reflect how Jesus, the Spirit of God, was, notwithstanding his extreme meekness and perfect tender-heartedness, treated by his enemies. So fierce was the opposition which he, the essence of being and Lord of the invisible, Lord of the visible and invisible, had to face, that he had nowhere to lay his head. He wandered continually from place to place, deprived of a permanent abode. Ponder that which befell Muhammad, the seal of the prophets. May the life of all else be a sacrifice unto him. How severe the afflictions which the leaders of the Jewish people and of the idol worshippers caused to reign upon him, who is the sovereign Lord of all, in consequence of his proclamation, the unity of God and of the truth of his message. By the righteousness of my cause, my pen groaneth, and all created things weep with a great weeping as a result of the woes he suffered at the hands of them that have broken the covenant of God, violated his testament, rejected his proofs, and disputed his signs. Thus recount we unto thee the tale of that which happened in days past. Happily thou mayest comprehend. So you see here it says that his pen groans and everything created weeps with a great weeping of what happened to these messengers of God. In another place he says, my pen is ashamed of even mentioning all this, writing about them. So you see, it's a very, very important point that Baha'u'llah is asking us to study. And the other point that has come to light for the people of the world in this book for the first time is that, as I just earlier mentioned, that there is no difference between the stations of any of these prophets, even Bab and Baha'u'llah. There is no difference. Although Baha'u'llah is said to be the greatest manifestation for the day. What is that a real word? It's not the greatest. What is it called? The
universal manifestation.
Supreme.
Supreme. Okay.
The supreme manifestation of the day. But that's to do with the intensity of the revelation, not their station. So you see, this is something new for the people of the world. All the other religions don't believe in that. That's why they are stuck to what they believe, and that is what they think is the best.
Can I just...
Yeah.
Please, May.
Dr. Bashi, I just have a question. Could you just please clarify or elucidate what the intensity of the revelation means?
Well, you see, what many of the prophets in the past, for example, like we are talking about Hud, we are talking about Noah. For example, Noah, who is said to have revealed his message for the people of the world, but it was only the people in that peninsula. Where's the other one? One is Sinai, where Egypt is now. What is that peninsula called? He appeared over there. And all those 5 prophets that we mentioned, each one of them appeared in the Sinai, in the Arabian Peninsula. Yeah, the Sinai Peninsula where Noah appeared, his message couldn't have gone anywhere else. So it was limited there. Then in the Arabian continent until Muhammad, it was really local. The message was for local people mainly. Although one sees some of the writings that was there. And the understanding of people in those days was not universal. It was just what they could see around them. But now Baha'u'llah has come for the whole of world. His teaching is for the whole of world. And that's why his revelation is the most supreme revelation. That's what I understand. I don't know about others.
Naim is raising his hand.
Could intensity maybe also have a time component in a way, such that, I mean, the sun of yesterday is today not shining as intense anymore as the sun of today. So intensity over time will change also with new revelations.
Yeah, good.
May I read a quote from book 4?
Yes.
It's from the
Sure.
first minutes where we are learning about the greatness of this day. Here Baha'u'llah says, great indeed is this day. The allusions made to it in all the sacred scriptures as the day of God attest its greatness. The soul of every prophet of God, of every divine messenger, hath thirsted for this wondrous day. All the diverse kindreds of the earth have likewise yearned to attain it. No sooner, however, had the day star of his revelation manifested itself in the heaven of God's will, than all, except those whom the Almighty was pleased to guide, were found dumbfounded and heedless.
Yes.
And also just another thing, as mentioned, I just want to clarify my understanding that there's a clear distinction between what the religion says and what the believers of that religion thinks it says. So,
exactly.
So we cannot say that the religions do not agree, or they are prophesying about this day, but the followers are not understanding these allusions, these references. Yeah.
So they revealed, their revelation was enough for the capacity of the people in those days as they appeared amongst them. Yeah, good point. The other point that people, I think somebody else had brought it up, the difference between prophets and the apostles. And, in Quran, it is said that each messenger of God had twofold function. One was as a Nabi or prophet, and the other one was as an apostle. An apostle is the one who brings with him a book. And a Nabi is the one who gives news. Nabi means giving good news. And so Muhammad was both Nabi as well as an apostle. Nabi in the sense that he foretold the coming of this age, the coming of Baha. And he was the last of that Nabi. That's why in traditions he's called Khatamun Nabi'in, the seal of the prophet. Now, Abdul Baha, there is many references again in this about the prophets. And Abdul Baha in some answered question explains this very beautifully. He says that prophets and messengers of God are no different, they're one and the same. But then he does make a difference between universal prophets, who are the main prophets who establish a religion. And then there are those minor prophets who are followers of that religion. In their own, they don't have any power to prophesy or do anything else. Therefore, overall, in the Baha'i understanding, prophets, messengers, manifestations, they're all one and the same. You can perhaps study, if you want, a little bit more on that and maybe share it with us next time you are here, Sunday.
Rasta, my understanding, partly based on what you said, so Muhammad was Nabi and Rasul, which is apostle.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And he was the last of the Nabi, which is those who prophesy or speak of the future.
Yes.
Whereas Rasul, or the apostle, is the one who brings the revelation.
Yes.
But when I read what Abdul Baha said about the two forms of prophet, where you have the prophet as in manifestation and the minor prophets,
Yes.
my understanding was that the minor prophets, as you say, they don't have power of their own, but they're rather like the moon. They reflect from the light, if you like, of the manifestation.
Yes.
and before the next manifestation comes, they might re-energize people to turn towards the teachings of the manifestation of that time. I think people like, would it be Daniel and Isaiah, people like that, for example? Would they be
yes.
examples? Yeah.
Zachariah and Daniel and yes, I think so. I've written it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you're right, absolutely. But it's this question about, some people talk about minor prophets, like I think it's mentioned in Christianity, minor prophets and major prophets, if you want to say. But one should not depend too much on the word itself. Like when we say prophet, you know, Abdul Baha, in that he says Bab and Baha'u'llah were prophets. You see? But they were those universal prophets like Muhammad, Christ, Baha'u'llah, Abraham, Moses. Yeah? And then David, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, they were the followers of the main religion. They were not prophets who established a religion by themselves. They didn't have any power by themselves. They did serve and promote the religion, but they were subordinate. They were under the main religion that they believed in. Right. Thank you, Simon, for your contribution. And thank you all. So Sunday is all right for us to come back day after tomorrow?
Sure.
Yes. I am sorry about my computer and the problem I've got here with my internet, but I hope next Friday, if I can get this sorted out by something or the other, I may be, but Sunday is probably going to be the same as today, unless we have it earlier in the day, which is not a good idea now to change anything.
For me, it's okay.
Right. Thank you so much.
For me, thank you.
Thank you for.
Thank you, Mr.
being
Beheshti.
so patient.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Yes.
much.
Mr. Beheshti, shall we say a closing prayer?
An ending prayer?
Yeah, shall we say our ending prayer for this lovely
Yes, please, of course.
I've got two young.
I've got my little brother to join me. My God, my adored one, my King, my desire, my God, my adored one, my desire. What unconfessed, my thanks to thee, I was zealous, and so awakened me. I was as one dead, that was quickened me, that is quickened me, with the water on my God, my adored one, my King, my desire, my God, my adored one.
Right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Sultan, how are you? Hi, Samsami. Hi, Hodai.
Hello, Dai.
Aloha, how are you? I
Good,
saw
thank you.
Dani as well today.
Oh, was he on?
He's that, yeah, he's